The evening rush had just begun at the Silver Spoon, one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city. The soft glow of crystal chandeliers reflected off polished silverware as wealthy patrons filled the tables, their quiet conversations mixing with the gentle notes from a string quartet in the corner. In the kitchen, things were far less peaceful. Lily Chen brushed a strand of dark hair from her face as she balanced 3 plates along her arm. At 26, she had mastered the art of waiting tables with grace that concealed her exhaustion. Tonight marked her 5th straight evening shift this week, but rent was due, and her music school tuition wouldn't pay itself. "Table 12 is asking for you again," said Miguel, another waiter, as he rushed past with a tray of champagne flutes. "The private party in the back room." Lily nodded, trying not to show her frustration. The private room had been booked by Carson Wells, a tech millionaire whose name regularly appeared in business magazines and whose reputation for being difficult preceded him. His group had been demanding all night, sending back dishes for the smallest imperfections and ordering the most expensive wines only to take a single sip. "Coming right up," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her tired eyes. She made her way through the busy dining area, dodging other servers and pausing briefly to answer a question from an elderly couple about the soup special. The restaurant owner insisted all staff know every ingredient in every dish, just one of many strict rules that kept the Silver Spoon's 5-star rating intact. Approaching the private room, Lily took a deep breath and adjusted her black bow tie. The restaurant's uniform was designed to make servers almost invisible: black pants, white shirt, black vest, and tie. But Carson Wells seemed to have a talent for making staff feel even smaller than their uniforms, suggested. She pushed open the heavy wooden door to find 10 people seated around an elegantly set table. Carson sat at the head, a man in his early 40s with perfectly styled hair and a custom suit that probably cost more than Lily's entire yearly income. He was mid-story, gesturing with his hands as the others laughed on cue. "And then I told him that 10 million was my final offer," he was saying. "Should have seen his face when I walked away. Called me the next morning begging to accept." Lily approached carefully with the fresh bottle of Bordeaux they had requested. As she began pouring for a woman in a red dress, Carson paused his story and looked up. "Finally, we've been waiting for this wine for ages," he said, though it had been less than 10 minutes since they ordered it. "I apologize for the wait." "Sir," Lily said politely, continuing to pour with practiced precision, "Chef also wanted me to inform you that your special dessert course will be ready shortly." Carson nodded dismissively and returned to his story. Lily moved around the table, filling each crystal glass with the ruby liquid. The group barely acknowledged her presence, except for one older gentleman who at least made eye contact and nodded a thank you. As she reached Carson, he suddenly pushed his chair back to emphasize a point in his story, knocking against Lily's arm. The wine bottle tilted, and before she could steady it, a splash of red liquid arced through the air, landing directly on Carson's pristine white shirt and light gray suit jacket. The room fell silent. "I'm so incredibly sorry," Lily gasped, immediately placing the bottle down and reaching for her service cloth. "Please let me help. Are you kidding me?" Carson stood up, his face flushing with anger as he looked down at the spreading stain. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs?" "I'm truly sorry, sir. It was an accident," Lily said, her heart pounding as she offered her cloth. Carson pushed her hand away. "An accident? That's what incompetent people always say." He looked at her name tag. "Lily. Well, Lily, you can be sure the restaurant will hear about this." The others at the table shifted uncomfortably. Some looked embarrassed, not for Carson, but for having to witness the scene. "I'll get our manager right away," Lily said, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning through her. "And bring club soda for the stain." "Don't bother," Carson snapped. "Just get out and send someone competent instead." Lily nodded, backing away from the table with as much dignity as she could muster. Once outside the door, she leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths to calm herself. After 8 years of waiting tables through high school and college, she'd handled difficult customers before, but something about Carson's deliberate cruelty cut deeper than usual. "Hey, you okay?" Miguel appeared beside her, concern evident in his eyes. "Wine spill on Mr. Important," she explained quietly. "Can you grab Rob? I need to get club soda and a clean cloth." Miguel squeezed her shoulder sympathetically before heading off to find the manager. Lily quickly gathered supplies from the service station and braced herself to return to the room. Before she could, Rob intercepted her, his perpetually worried expression even more pronounced. "I'll handle this," the manager said. "Wait in my office." 30 minutes later, Lily sat across from Rob's desk, her hands folded in her lap. The spill had been cleaned, Carson's group had finished their meal, and the restaurant had comped their entire evening, a bill well over $2,000. "He's demanding you be fired," Rob said, rubbing his temples. "Says he comes here 3 times a month with business associates and spends a fortune." Lily felt her stomach drop. She couldn't lose this job. "Not now, Rob, it was an accident. He moved his chair back suddenly while I was pouring." "I know," Rob sighed. "Look, I'm not firing you. You're one of our best. But he's requested you never serve his table again, and I had to agree to that. Also," he hesitated, "he's knocked you down to regular sections for 2 weeks. No private parties or VIP tables. That meant significantly lower tips. Money Lily desperately needed for next semester's tuition payment." "I understand," she said quietly, swallowing her frustration. "For what it's worth, the older gentleman, Mr. Harrison, left this for you." Rob slid an envelope across the desk. Inside was a $100 bill and a note that simply read, "Some people forget their manners. You handled yourself with grace." The kindness nearly brought tears to Lily's eyes, but she blinked them back. One decent person didn't erase the position she was now in. After her shift ended at midnight, Lily walked home instead of taking the bus, needing the crisp night air to clear her head. Her small apartment was 20 blocks from the restaurant, in a neighborhood that had seen better days but was still relatively safe. As she walked, she pulled out her phone and checked her bank account, a habit that always left her feeling slightly sick. Between rent, utilities, and her half-finished music degree, her savings were dangerously low. The 2 weeks of reduced tips would hurt badly. Passing a community center, Lily paused to look at the bulletin board visible through the window. A flyer announced weekend piano lessons needed. She took a photo of the contact information. Perhaps this could help make up the lost income. When she finally reached her 3rd-floor walk-up, Lily unlocked the 3 separate locks her landlord had installed after a break-in last year. The apartment was small but clean, with second-hand furniture arranged to make the most of the limited space. In the corner sat her most prized possession, an upright piano that had belonged to her grandmother. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but the sound was warm and true. Too tired to change out of her uniform, Lily sat down on the worn bench and ran her fingers over the keys without pressing down. Music had been her escape for as long as she could remember. After her parents split when she was 9, the piano became her constant companion, something predictable in an unpredictable world. If she played the notes correctly, they always responded exactly as they should, unlike people. She pressed a key gently, letting a single note hang in the quiet apartment. Then another. Soon her fingers were dancing across the keyboard, playing a Chopin nocturne from memory. The day's humiliation melted away as the music filled the small space. This was why she kept working those double shifts. Why she took the verbal abuse from customers like Carson Wells. Someday she would finish her degree. Someday she would play in concert halls instead of practicing in her tiny apartment with thin walls that prompted occasional banging from her neighbors. As the final notes faded, Lily's phone buzzed with a text from her friend Kate. "How was work?" "Still on for coffee tomorrow." Lily texted back, "Terrible. Spilled wine on a millionaire. Need to tell you all about it. Coffee definitely on." She set her alarm for early morning, another double shift awaited, and finally changed out of her uniform. As she drifted off to sleep, she had no idea that Carson Wells had not forgotten her. In fact, he had spent the rest of his evening scrolling through the restaurant's social media page where staff were featured, finding the photo from last year's employee appreciation post. The photo showed Lily at the restaurant's grand piano, which was normally just for show. The caption read, "Our multi-talented staff includes Lily, who studied at the City Conservatory before taking a break to work full-time." Carson smiled to himself in his penthouse across town. He had found the perfect entertainment for his upcoming party. 2 weeks passed, and life fell into its familiar rhythm for Lily. She worked her shifts at the Silver Spoon, practiced piano whenever her neighbors wouldn't complain, and tried to ignore the growing stack of bills on her kitchen counter. The incident with Carson Wells had faded to just another story about difficult customers, one she had shared over coffee with her friend Kate while they both rolled their eyes at the entitlement of the ultra-wealthy. Thursday, morning brought rare sunshine through her apartment window as Lily sipped instant coffee, scanning job listings on her phone. The music school had posted a part-time position in their administrative office, less money than waiting tables but potentially more flexible hours. She was halfway through the application when her phone rang. "Hello, Lily Chen speaking," she answered, not recognizing the number. "Ms. Chen, this is Victoria Hamilton, executive assistant to Carson Wells." Lily nearly choked on her coffee. Yes? Mr. Wells is hosting a private event this Saturday evening at his residence. He has specifically requested you as part of the service staff. There must be some mistake, Lily said, confused. Mr. Wells and I had an unfortunate interaction at the restaurant a couple weeks ago. There's no mistake, Victoria's crisp voice replied. The event requires 10 servers, and he asked for you by name. The pay is $500 for the evening, plus potential tips. The event runs from 6 p.m. to midnight. Lily sat down hard on her second-hand couch. $500 for one night. That was more than she'd make in a week of regular shifts. It would cover half her upcoming tuition payment. That's very generous, but Mr. Wells said to mention that he's aware of the unfortunate incident and wishes to make amends. He feels terrible about how he reacted. Lily doubted that very much. Men like Carson Wells didn't feel terrible about how they treated service workers. But $500. Can I think about it and call you back? She asked. The position needs to be filled by end of day. I'll text you the address and details. Please confirm by 5 p.m. if you're accepting. After Victoria hung up, Lily stared at her phone in disbelief. Why would Carson Wells want the waitress who spilled wine on his expensive suit to serve at his home? It made no sense. She called Kate immediately. It sounds sketchy, Kate said after Lily explained the situation. Why would he ask for you specifically? Maybe he wants to humiliate you somehow. That's what I was thinking, Lily agreed. But $500 for one night, Kate, that's a lot of money. True. And what's the worst that could happen? If he's rude again, you just leave. At least you'll have other servers there with you. By the end of their call, Lily had nearly convinced herself to accept the offer. She checked her bank account again, a habit that was almost compulsive now. And seeing the dwindling balance settled the matter. She texted Victoria to confirm. The response came immediately. Excellent. Dress code is all black. Car will pick you up at 4:30 p.m. Saturday. A car? That seemed excessive, but everything about this situation was strange. Saturday arrived, and at precisely 4:30, a sleek black car pulled up outside Lily's apartment building. The driver, an older man in a suit, opened the door for her. Ms. Chen, I'm Arthur, Mr. Wells' driver. It's a pleasure to meet you. The drive took them out of the city and up winding roads into the hills where the wealthiest residents lived. Lily had never been to this neighborhood before, but she'd heard about the mansions with their perfect views and private security. They passed through a gate with a guardhouse and drove up a long, curved driveway bordered by perfectly manicured gardens. The house, if something that size could be called a house, was modern and imposing, all glass and stone with dramatic angles. Arthur led her to a service entrance where a woman in a black suit waited. Lily Chen? I'm Victoria Hamilton. We spoke on the phone. Follow me for a brief orientation before the other staff arrives. Victoria was tall and elegant, with the kind of efficient movements that suggested she never wasted time or energy on anything unnecessary. She led Lily through what seemed like an endless maze of hallways. The event tonight is a gathering of Mr. Wells's business associates and friends, 40 guests total. The other servers will handle food and beverages throughout the main areas. You've been assigned to the library and adjacent sitting room. They stopped in a wood-paneled room lined with bookshelves that stretched to the ceiling. A bar cart sat in one corner stocked with expensive-looking bottles. You'll serve drinks here during the first part of the evening. Mr. Wells may have additional duties for you later. Additional duties? That sounded ominous. What kind of additional duties? Victoria checked her tablet. It doesn't specify. I'm sure he'll inform you if necessary. She handed Lily a small earpiece. All staff wear these so the catering manager can communicate with you. Now let me show you where the service areas are. An hour later, the party was in full swing. The other servers were professionals from a high-end catering company, all moving with practiced efficiency. Lily stationed herself in the library as instructed, serving drinks to small groups of guests who wandered in. Most ignored her completely, discussing business deals and vacation homes as if she were invisible. Around 8 o'clock, Victoria appeared in the doorway and motioned to Lily. "Mr. Wells would like to see you in the main hall." Lily followed Victoria through the house to a massive open area where most of the guests had gathered. A string quartet played in one corner, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the city lights below. At the center of the room stood a gleaming grand piano that probably cost more than Lily would earn in 10 years. Carson Wells was holding court near the piano, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark blue suit. He smiled when he saw Lily. Not a kind smile, but the smile of someone who knows something you don't. "Ah, here she is," he said, loud enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. "Everyone, this is Lily Chen, the waitress I was telling you about." Lily felt her face grow warm as dozens of eyes turned toward her. What was happening? Carson gestured for her to come closer. "Lily, I want to apologize properly for my behavior at the restaurant. It was inexcusable." His voice sounded sincere, but something in his eyes made Lily uneasy. This performance wasn't for her benefit. "That's very kind of you." "Mr. Wells, apology accepted." She hoped this would be the end of it so she could return to her assigned position. "I understand you're quite musical," Carson continued, placing a hand on the piano. "Victoria did some research and found you studied at the conservatory." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. They had researched her. "I did, yes, but I'm on a break from my studies at the moment." "Wonderful." Carson clapped his hands together. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have a special treat for you tonight. Lily here is going to play something for us." The room fell silent. Lily stood frozen in place as she realized what was happening. This was why he had invited her, not to make amends, but to put her on display like some performing animal. "I'm here as a server, Mr. Wells," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm not prepared to perform." "Nonsense." Carson's smile hardened slightly. "I'm paying you quite generously for the evening. Consider this part of your duties." Several guests looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. A woman in a red dress, the same one from the restaurant, whispered something to her companion and laughed behind her hand. Carson gestured to the piano bench. "Please, we're all eager to hear what they teach at the conservatory these days." Lily understood the trap she was in. If she refused, she would look ungrateful and would certainly not receive the promised payment she so desperately needed. If she played poorly, these people would laugh at her. Carson would have his revenge. For the wine incident, humiliating her far worse than she had embarrassed him. She looked around the room at the expectant faces of people who saw her as nothing more than evening entertainment. Part of her wanted to walk out, to tell Carson exactly what she thought of his cruel game. But another part, the practical part that knew her rent was due and her tuition payment was looming, moved her feet toward the piano. As she sat down on the bench, Lily noticed a man standing near the back of the room. Unlike the others, he wasn't smiling or whispering. He was watching with genuine curiosity. Something about his attentive gaze gave her a small boost of courage. Lily took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. The piano was perfectly in tune, its action so responsive it almost played itself. It was easily the finest instrument she had ever touched. Carson stood nearby, arms crossed, waiting for her to embarrass herself. The entire room had gone quiet, even the string quartet pausing their playing to watch the scene unfold. In that moment, looking down at the black and white keys, Lily made a decision. If this was to be her humiliation, she would not go down without a fight. Carson Wells had no idea who he was dealing with. Her fingers hovered over the keys as she decided what to play. Something technically challenging enough to show her skill, but also beautiful enough to move even these jaded, wealthy people. Her mind went to Chopin, her favorite composer whose music had seen her through the darkest times of her life. She would play for herself, not for them. And especially not for Carson Wells, who stood waiting for her to fail, unaware that he had just handed her the opportunity of a lifetime. The room held its breath as Lily's fingers hovered over the keys. She could feel Carson's eyes on her, waiting for her to stumble. The expensive perfume of the guests, the soft clink of ice in crystal glasses, the hushed whispers. All of it faded away as Lily closed her eyes for just a moment. Then she began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor filled the room. Gentle at first, almost tentative, like raindrops before a storm. Lily had chosen this piece deliberately. It started simply enough but built to passages of incredible technical difficulty. It told a story of its own, beginning in quiet, reflection before growing into something powerful and emotionally complex, just like her. Her left hand established the delicate pattern and her right hand carried the haunting melody. Lily felt the familiar calm that always came when she played. This was her world, a place where nothing existed except the music. Her fingers remembered every note, every subtle shift in tempo, every crescendo and diminuendo. Carson's smug expression began to falter. He had expected hesitation, missed notes, the awkward fumbling of someone who had exaggerated their abilities. Instead, he was witnessing something entirely different. The piece progressed and Lily leaned into the more complex sections, her hands moving with increasing confidence. The room had gone completely silent now, the guests seemingly frozen in place. Even the servers had stopped their rounds, standing at the edges of the room, watching. A woman near the front who had been smirking earlier slowly lowered her champagne glass, her eyes widening in surprise. An older gentleman in the corner removed his glasses and leaned forward, as if not quite believing what he was hearing. Carson shifted uncomfortably, his planned humiliation unraveling before his eyes. He glanced around at his guests, seeing their rapt attention, their genuine appreciation for what was happening. This was not going according to plan at all. As Lily reached the thunderous middle section of the piece, her fingers flew across the keys in rapid, complicated patterns. The music swelled, filling every corner of the vast room. This part of the piece demanded everything: technical precision, emotional depth, physical stamina, and Lily gave it all. Years of practice, of playing until her hands ached, of saving every penny for lessons, all culminated in this moment. She was no longer a waitress in borrowed finery, performing at the whim of a cruel employer. She was an artist speaking through Chopin's notes, telling her own story of struggle and perseverance. The man at the back of the room, the one whose gaze had given Lily that small spark of courage, moved closer, his eyes never leaving her hands. Unlike the others, he seemed to understand exactly what he was witnessing. He watched with the focused attention of someone who knew music intimately. As the piece progressed toward its dramatic conclusion, Lily felt something shift inside her. The fear and humiliation that had followed her up to the piano bench had vanished. In their place was a quiet certainty. This was what she was meant to do. Not serve drinks to people who looked through her, but create something beautiful that made them truly see her. Her fingers danced through the final challenging passages, navigating the complex harmonies and rhythms with confidence. When she played the final chords, letting them resonate and then fade into silence, she kept her eyes closed for a moment longer, not yet ready to break the spell. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then someone began to clap, slow, deliberate applause. Lily opened her eyes to see the man from the back of the room stepping forward, his face alight with appreciation. Others joined in, the applause building until it filled the room as completely as the music had moments before. Some guests were exchanging astonished glances. Others were smiling with genuine pleasure. One woman had tears in her eyes. Even Victoria, Carson's ever-efficient assistant, was applauding, her professional mask slipping to reveal something like respect. Carson stood frozen, his face a complicated mix of emotions: surprise, embarrassment, and something harder to define. This was not the outcome he had anticipated when he'd concocted his little revenge scheme. He had been outplayed quite literally. The man who had started the applause approached the piano. He was in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "Truly extraordinary. I'm Thomas Bennett, director of the City Symphony." Lily felt her heart skip. Everyone in the music world knew Thomas Bennett. His orchestra was renowned, his opinion respected worldwide. "Lily Chen," she replied, her voice slightly breathless from the exertion of the piece and the emotion of the moment. "Ms. Chen, where did you study?" "The City Conservatory, sir." "I'm on a break from my final year." "A break?" He raised an eyebrow. "With talent like yours?" Lily hesitated, aware of the many eyes still on her. "Financial reasons," she said simply, her pride not allowing for more explanation. Understanding flickered in Thomas Bennett's eyes. He nodded slightly, then reached into his pocket for a business card. "I'd like you to call my office on Monday. We should discuss your future. Lily took the card with slightly trembling fingers. Was this really happening? Thank you, she managed, not trusting herself to say more. Thomas turned to Carson, who had finally composed himself and stepped forward. Wells, you've been holding out on us. You never mentioned you were a patron of such remarkable talent. Carson cleared his throat. Ms. Chen works at a restaurant I frequent. I recently became aware of her musical background. Well, it was quite the surprise, Thomas said, a knowing look in his eyes that suggested he understood exactly what had been intended. A delightful one. Guests had begun to circulate again, many stopping by the piano to offer compliments. Lily thanked them politely, still trying to process what had just happened. From the corner of her eye, she saw Carson retreat to the bar, looking like a man whose clever plan had backfired spectacularly. Victoria appeared at Lily's side. Mr. Wells would like you to continue playing if you're willing. Consider yourself relieved of serving duties for the remainder of the evening. Was that respect in Victoria's voice? Lily nodded, turning back to the keys. Any requests? Whatever you feel inspired to play, Victoria replied, the slightest smile softening her professional demeanor. As Lily began a Debussy piece, her fingers finding the dreamlike patterns with ease, she noticed Carson watching her from across the room. His expression was unreadable now, his earlier smugness replaced by something more thoughtful. He raised his glass slightly in what might have been acknowledgement or perhaps surrender. For the next hour, Lily played piece after piece, drawing from her extensive repertoire. Classical compositions flowed into jazz standards, then back to the romantic composers she loved best. The party continued around her, but she remained at its center, the music creating a backdrop for conversations and connections. Thomas Bennett returned several times, once bringing a patron of the arts who listened with equal appreciation. They spoke quietly together, occasionally glancing her way. By the time Lily played her final piece, a gentle Chopin nocturne that seemed to float in the air like a lullaby, many guests had departed. Those who remained listened in appreciative silence, the evening's pretense and posturing giving way to genuine enjoyment. As the last notes faded, Thomas approached again. Monday, Miss Chen, 10 o'clock. Don't forget. I won't, Lily promised, her mind already racing with possibilities. The remaining guests drifted toward the exits, many stopping to thank her. Even the woman in the red dress who had laughed earlier offered a genuine compliment. Carson remained in the background watching the scene unfold. When the room had emptied, he finally approached the piano. Lily steeled herself, unsure what to expect. That was not what I anticipated, he said after a moment of awkward silence. Lily met his gaze steadily. I gathered that, Mr. Wells. You're very talented. Yes, she said simply. There was no point in false modesty now. Carson looked uncomfortable, an expression Lily suspected was rare for him. I had intended a different outcome for this evening. I know, he nodded, accepting her directness. Thomas Bennett doesn't offer auditions lightly. He's very selective. I'm aware of that. Carson studied her, seeming to see her clearly for the first time. Do you need a ride home? Your assistant arranged one. Another awkward silence stretched between them. Well, Carson said finally. Good luck with the audition. As Lily gathered her things and prepared to leave, she realized something had shifted fundamentally tonight. She had walked into this house as a waitress, someone to be ordered about and humiliated for amusement. She was leaving as a musician whose talent had been recognized by one of the most important figures in the city's cultural world, and it had happened because Carson Wells had tried to embarrass her. Sometimes, life took unexpected turns. Sometimes a moment meant to break you became the moment that set you free. Monday morning arrived with golden autumn sunshine streaming through Lily's apartment windows. She had barely slept, replaying Saturday night's events in her mind like a movie she couldn't pause. The memory of Thomas Bennett's business card burning a hole in her pocket, the stunned expressions on the guests' faces, the way Carson Wells had looked at her afterward, like he was seeing a completely different person. She stood in front of her closet now, pushing aside her waitress uniform to examine what little professional clothing she owned. The audition was in 2 hours and nothing seemed right. Too casual, too worn, too young. She finally settled on a simple black dress and her only pair of decent shoes, hoping their scuffed toes wouldn't be too noticeable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kate. Good luck today. You're going to blow them away just like you did those rich snobs. Lily smiled, grateful for her friend's enthusiasm. She hadn't planned to tell anyone about the audition, afraid of getting her hopes up. But after returning home Saturday night, still buzzing with adrenaline, she'd called Kate and spilled everything. Thomas Bennett, Kate had whispered in awe. The Thomas Bennett? Lily, this is huge. It was huge. Terrifyingly huge. The City Symphony was prestigious, its members selected from top conservatories worldwide. Even getting an audition was remarkable. Lily knew that without Saturday night's unexpected performance, she would never have caught Thomas Bennett's attention, which meant, ironically, that she owed this opportunity to Carson Wells and his failed attempt to humiliate her. 45 minutes later, Lily stood outside the symphony hall trying to calm her racing heart. The building was imposing, all glass and concrete with sweeping architectural lines. Inside, a receptionist directed her to a practice room to warm up before her audition. The room contained a baby grand piano that would have seemed impressive a week ago, before she'd played Carson's magnificent instrument. Still, its touch was responsive and the tone clear. Lily ran through scales and arpeggios, then parts of the pieces she had prepared, trying to focus solely on the music. A gentle knock interrupted her practice. The door opened to reveal Thomas Bennett, casually dressed in khakis and a blue sweater that made him look more like a kind grandfather than one of the most powerful figures in classical music. Ms. Chen, glad you could make it, he smiled warmly. How are you feeling? Nervous, Lily admitted. No point pretending otherwise, he nodded understandingly. That's natural. But after what I heard Saturday night, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. Come with me. We'll use the recital hall instead of the usual audition room. Better acoustics. Lily followed him through corridors lined with photographs of the symphony in performance, famous soloists who had appeared with them, composers who had premiered works with the orchestra. Her nervousness ratcheted up another notch. The recital hall was intimate, with perhaps 200 seats surrounding a central stage, where a concert grand piano gleamed under carefully positioned lights. To Lily's surprise, 3 people were already seated in the front row. My colleagues, Thomas explained. Our concertmaster Diane, our principal cellist Ravi, and our administrative director Helen. Lily nodded politely to each of them, trying to keep her hands from trembling. This was far more formal than she had expected. I hope you don't mind, Thomas continued. After I told them about your playing, they were quite interested to hear you themselves. He led her to the piano and adjusted the bench height while she arranged her sheet music. Whenever you're ready, he said gently, joining his colleagues in the front row. Lily took a deep breath, remembering how she had felt at Carson's piano, the fear giving way to confidence, the sense of rightness that had come over her. She could do this. She had already done it under much more stressful circumstances. She began with Bach, a prelude and fugue that showcased technical precision. The acoustics in the hall were perfect, the notes ringing clear and true. She could see Thomas nodding slightly as she navigated the complex counterpoint. Next came Beethoven, a sonata movement full of dramatic contrasts. Lily leaned into the passionate sections, allowing herself to feel the music rather than just play it. This had always been her strength, the ability to convey emotion through her playing. She finished with Chopin, the same ballade she had played at Carson's party. It felt different here, in this sacred space of music, but no less powerful. As she played the final chords, she realized she had been so absorbed in the music that she'd forgotten to be nervous. The small audience was silent for a moment, then burst into enthusiastic applause. Extraordinary, Thomas said, coming to join her at the piano. Just as impressive as Saturday night, but with more nuance and a proper acoustic space. He turned to his colleagues. What did I tell you? Diane, the concertmaster, smiled warmly. Your Bach was particularly lovely. So clean, but not mechanical. Ravi, the cellist, nodded in agreement. Your touch is exceptional. Very sensitive. Helen, the administrative director, had a more practical question. Ms. Chen, Thomas mentioned you're taking a break from the conservatory. Would you be interested in completing your degree? Of course, Lily replied. But financially it's been challenging. I've been working full-time to save for tuition. The 4 exchanged glances seeming to communicate silently. Then Thomas cleared his throat. We have a proposal for you. Ms. Chen, the symphony has a young artist program, a scholarship that includes tuition to complete your degree, private lessons with our principal pianist, and a stipend for living expenses. Lily stared at him, certain she had misheard. A full scholarship? Yes, Helen confirmed. In return, you would perform with the symphony as a featured soloist for 2 concerts this season, and serve as our outreach pianist, playing at community events and educational programs. It's quite demanding, Thomas added. You would be very busy between your studies and symphony obligations. But based on what we've heard, you're more than capable. Lily felt lightheaded. This wasn't just an audition. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. No more double shifts at the restaurant. No more counting pennies for tuition. A chance to complete her education and perform with a professional orchestra. I don't know what to say, she managed, her voice thick with emotion. Say yes, Diane suggested with a smile. Yes, Lily repeated, hardly believing this was real. Absolutely yes. The details were discussed over coffee in Thomas's office, paperwork to complete, a schedule to establish, arrangements to be made with the conservatory. By the time Lily left the symphony hall 2 hours later, her life had completely transformed. The afternoon sun felt warmer somehow as she walked through the city, Thomas's parting words echoing in her mind. You have a remarkable gift. Ms. Chen, all you needed was the right opportunity to be heard. The right opportunity, which had come ironically from Carson Wells's attempt to embarrass her. As if her thoughts had conjured him, Lily's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She answered cautiously. Ms. Chen? This is Victoria Hamilton, Mr. Wells's assistant. Lily stopped walking, suddenly tense. Yes? Mr. Wells would like to speak with you if you have a moment. Before Lily could respond, Carson's voice came on the line. Miss Chen, I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Actually, I've just come from an audition with the symphony, Lily said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. Ah, and how did it go? Very well. They've offered me a place in their Young Artist program, a full scholarship to finish my degree plus a performance schedule with the orchestra. There was a pause. Congratulations, Carson said, sounding genuinely impressed. That's quite an achievement. Thank you. Lily waited, curious about the real reason for his call. I've been reflecting on Saturday night, Carson continued, his tone more serious than she had ever heard it. What I did, inviting you to play in order to embarrass you, was inexcusable. I behaved abominably. The directness of his apology surprised her. Why did you do it? Another pause. Wounded pride, I suppose. The wine incident made me look foolish in front of my guests. I wanted to return the favor. By humiliating me in front of an even larger audience. Yes, Carson admitted. Not my finest moment. No, Lily agreed. It wasn't. But as it turned out, my petty revenge had unintended consequences. You impressed Thomas Bennett, which led to today's opportunity. Lily couldn't argue with that. Life takes unexpected turns. Indeed it does. Carson cleared his throat. Which brings me to the purpose of my call. I'd like to make amends if possible. There's no need. Please, he interrupted. I'd like to establish a scholarship fund for the conservatory. For talented musicians facing financial hardship. Would you be willing to advise on how it should be structured? Lily stopped walking entirely, taken aback by the offer. You're serious? Completely. I've already spoken with the conservatory's dean. The fund would cover tuition, living expenses, and performance opportunities. I'd like your input to ensure it truly meets students' needs. Lily found herself speechless for the second time that day. The offer was generous, potentially life-changing, for students like herself who had the talent but not the financial resources to pursue their dreams. I'd be happy to help, she said finally. Excellent. Perhaps we could discuss it over coffee sometime this week. I promise to be on my best behavior. There was a hint of self-deprecating humor in his voice that made Lily smile despite herself. I'll hold you to that, Mr. Wells. Please call me Carson. After they arranged a meeting time and ended the call, Lily continued her walk home, her mind reeling from the day's events. In the span of 48 hours, her life had completely changed course. From waitress to symphony pianist, from struggling student to scholarship recipient, and Carson Wells, the arrogant millionaire who had tried to humiliate her, was now establishing a scholarship fund with her guidance. Sometimes revenge backfired in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes humiliation turned to triumph. And sometimes, Lily thought as she looked up at the bright autumn sky, Life gave you second chances when you least expected them. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of change for Lily. Winter had given way to spring, bringing new growth that mirrored her own transformation. She had returned to the conservatory, thrown herself into her studies, and practiced with an intensity that surprised even her professors. The young artist program was demanding, just as Thomas had warned, but Lily thrived under the pressure. Today, she stood in the wings of the city concert hall, peeking out at the audience filing in for the evening's performance. This was her debut as a featured soloist with the symphony, the first of the 2 performances required by her scholarship. The program included Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1, a piece she had dreamed of performing since she was 12 years old. Nervous, Thomas Bennett appeared beside her, already dressed in his conductor's attire. Terrified, Lily admitted with a small laugh. But the good kind of terrified. Thomas smiled warmly. You're more than prepared. Your rehearsals have been flawless. Thank you for taking a chance on me, Lily said, suddenly serious. That night at Carson's party, it changed everything. Talent like yours would have found its way eventually, Thomas replied. But yes, sometimes life presents opportunities in the strangest packages. He checked his watch. 30 minutes until curtain. I'll see you out there. As Thomas walked away, Lily felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Carson Wells looking somewhat out of place backstage in his perfectly tailored suit. I hope I'm not intruding, he said, his voice softer than she remembered from their first encounters. Not at all. Thank you for coming. Over the past months, they had met several times to discuss the scholarship fund he was establishing. Their initial coffee meeting had been awkward at first, but as they focused on the practical details of the program, a cautious respect had developed between them. Carson had listened carefully to Lily's suggestions about what students truly needed, not just tuition, but living expenses, instrument maintenance, travel funds for competitions. I wouldn't miss your debut, Carson said. Besides, I'm invested now. He smiled, and Lily noted how different it was from the smug expression he had worn at the restaurant or the calculated smile at his party. This seemed genuine. The scholarship announcement goes out tomorrow, Lily asked, knowing the conservatory planned to publicize the new fund immediately after tonight's concert. Carson nodded. Everything's set. 10 full scholarships per year, with your specifications built in. The dean is quite pleased. 10 students who won't have to work double shifts while trying to practice 4 hours a day, Lily said, thinking of her own struggle. And the outreach program to local schools begins next month. Children who've never seen a concert hall will have the chance to discover music. This had been Lily's idea, using part of the fund to bring classical music to underprivileged schools, offering free lessons to children who showed interest and aptitude. Carson had doubled the budget when she proposed it. You've done something remarkable, Lily told him. This fund will change lives. Carson looked slightly embarrassed by the praise. It was your vision. I just provided the resources. A stagehand approached, politely informing Lily it was time to prepare for her entrance. Carson wished her luck and made his way back to the audience, where Lily knew he was seated in the front row. She had personally sent him the ticket, along with a note thanking him for his support. In the dressing room, Lily took a final look at herself in the mirror. The conservatory had provided her concert attire, a flowing midnight blue gown that made her feel like a different person from the waitress in the black uniform. Her hair was swept up elegantly, her makeup subtle but enhancing. But it wasn't just her appearance that had changed. There was a confidence in her eyes now, a certainty that had come from months of hard work and recognition of her talent. She thought of the girl who had stood trembling at Carson's piano, afraid of humiliation but too proud to walk away. That moment of courage had led to this one. The call came for her to take her position. Lily walked through the backstage area, nodding to orchestra members who offered encouraging smiles. Many had become friends during rehearsals, treating her as a colleague rather than a student. She stepped onto the stage to warm applause, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. The concert hall was sold out, nearly 2,000 people waiting to hear her play. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out familiar faces in the audience. Kate was there, of course, beaming with pride. Some of her professors from the conservatory, Thomas's wife and children, and Carson, sitting beside Victoria, who gave Lily a small nod of acknowledgement. Lily took her place at the piano, a magnificent concert grand, and waited as Thomas approached the podium. He raised his baton, the orchestra poised and ready, and Lily placed her hands on the keys. The famous opening chords of the Tchaikovsky concerto rang out, bold and commanding. Lily had always loved how this piece began with the piano making such a powerful statement, like a declaration of presence. The orchestra joined in, and she felt the music flow through her, around her, carrying her forward. There were no thoughts now of restaurants or spilled wine or cruel jokes. Only the music mattered, the conversation between piano and orchestra, the story they were telling together, the emotions they were sharing with the audience. When the final movement reached its thunderous conclusion, Lily was breathless, exhilarated, alive in a way she had never felt before. The audience erupted in applause, rising to their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. Thomas gestured for Lily to take a bow, his face alight with pride. As she looked out at the sea of applauding people, Lily caught Carson's eye. He was clapping as enthusiastically as anyone, his expression one of genuine admiration. Their unlikely connection had changed both their lives. His attempted humiliation had led to her triumph, and his subsequent guilt had spawned a program that would help countless young musicians. The reception after the concert was crowded with well-wishers. Thomas introduced Lily to important figures in the music world, conductors, agents, recording executives. Kate hugged her fiercely, declaring it was the best night of her life, even though I don't understand classical music. Professors offered congratulations and critiques in equal measure. Carson approached as the crowd was thinning, waiting patiently for a moment when Lily was alone. "You were magnificent," he said simply. "Thank you. I've been thinking," he continued, "about that night at my house when you first played for my guests." Lily raised an eyebrow, surprised he would bring up what must be an uncomfortable memory. "I invited you there to embarrass you," Carson said quietly, "to put you in your place as I saw it. I thought I was teaching you a lesson about respecting your betters." "And?" Lily prompted when he paused. "And instead you taught me about real talent, real courage, about not judging people by their jobs or their bank accounts." He smiled ruefully. It was an expensive lesson for my ego, but one I needed to learn. Before Lily could respond, Thomas joined them, champagne glasses in hand. "Carson, good to see you. I understand we have you to thank for discovering our rising star here." Carson laughed. "Hardly. I merely provided the piano. Ms. Chen did all the work." "Well, your scholarship fund announcement tomorrow will be the perfect follow-up to tonight's success," Thomas said. "The press is already calling this the breakthrough performance of the year." The three of them chatted about the concert and the scholarship program until other guests claimed Thomas's attention. Left alone again with Carson, Lily felt the need to offer her own acknowledgement of how far they'd both come. "You know," she said, "I hated you that night at the restaurant." Carson winced. "I deserved it. And when you invited me to your party, I almost didn't go. My friend Kate was convinced you were planning something awful. She was right. But now," Lily continued, "I'm almost grateful for what happened. Not for the intention behind it, but for the outcome. Music has a way of revealing truth," Carson said thoughtfully. "When you played that night, everyone in that room saw who you really were. Not a waitress in borrowed clothes, but an artist of extraordinary talent. Including me," he paused. "Especially me." The reception was winding down, guests departing with final congratulations. Lily had an early rehearsal the next morning. Preparation for her second required performance now expanded into a full recital due to the success of tonight's concert. "I should go," she said. "Long day tomorrow." "Of course." Carson hesitated, then extended his hand. "Thank you, Miss Chen, for showing me what true talent looks like, and for helping me do something worthwhile with my money for a change." Lily took his hand, remembering how differently they had parted at their first meeting, her humiliated by spilled wine, him cruel and dismissive. "Thank you, Mr. Wells, for the piano to play on that night, and for turning a moment meant to shame me into something that helps others." Outside the concert hall, spring rain fell gently on the city streets. Lily stood under the awning, waiting for the car the symphony had arranged to take her home. So much had changed in 6 months. Her education, her career, her future prospects. She was no longer worried about making rent or paying tuition. She no longer worked double shifts that left her too exhausted to practice. And Carson Wells was no longer the villain in her story, but a complicated character who had found redemption in his own way.